No, we're not going live. We're just recording.
Oh.
Yeah. Hi. Again.
Hello again.
So, we are back with another Reviews in the Dark. This time we're going to be talking about episodes 3 and 4 of Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power.
We're both a little stuffy.
But yeah, both a little stuffy. Sorry about that. We're recovering from some lingering colds.
Yeah.
So, apologies for however we may sound.
So, let's just start with episode 3. I will say, in general, episode 3 was one of my favorite episodes. It was our introduction into Numenor.
Yep.
I was freaking out because I'm like, oh my gosh, this city's so beautiful, and they have no idea what's
wrecked.
coming. So I really enjoyed seeing Numenor. I enjoyed seeing the costuming, the city, the architecture, introduction to the people. I thought all of that was done really well. I only have one criticism, which is the Galadriel scene where she's riding on the horse.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
How did Nerd of the Rings, he just called it kind of hokey?
Yeah, he called it kind of hokey, which it is, but also, like, I've heard different complaints about it, like, I don't know, it was just done wrong. They could have done this a number of different ways, and
don't get me wrong, showing off her
enjoyment of riding
ride
horses,
is fine. That's a fine thing, but it was, for me, it was the slow-mo.
And it lingers. We watched it again, and I'm like, man, this is long.
Yeah, it was like a solid 2 minutes of slow-mo horse riding.
It was more like 30 seconds. But that 30 seconds feels long.
Yeah.
When you're just like, okay. Like, it's so long. And then she has a very wide grin. And considering all we see of Galadriel throughout all the rest of the episodes is a frowning face. Yes, very stern.
And she talks with her mouth kind of closed.
Which, I don't have a problem with that. But considering that's all that we see, and then it goes from that to...
Yeah.
It's very...
Yeah.
I don't like it. But everything else, I loved.
That complaint aside.
I loved the library. I love Elendil, the captain. Is that his name? Elendil. I loved Numenor. I loved seeing the city. I loved the costuming. I thought it was...
the costuming was so good.
I thought it was great. So...
I can make that, by the way. The thing that the queen wears, that scale mail
thing. The scale mail, yeah.
That's something I can make.
We could probably even figure out how to make the headdress.
Oh, probably.
But even... yeah. The whole episode, to me, was my favorite by far. Because, number 1... a little slow, but I enjoyed it. Number 2 was really good, but I thought was a solid introduction into the world. Mm-hmm. This one I thought was just a really good episode. Minus that one thing.
Sure.
And I have another complaint, but I'm going to save this complaint for episode 4, because it's more of a general complaint. But
okay.
Do you have any other thoughts on episode 3? I know it's been a while since we watched it.
So, man, I feel like a lot happens. So they show up in Numenor, and everybody in Numenor is kind of like, elf, and all of that. They even refer to her as elf in a derogatory way, not as like saying you're an elf. It's you're an elf.
Yeah, stand
kind of thing.
Elf. Yeah.
Like, what's your name, elf? What are you doing here, elf? And you could just tell there's this
derogatory nature to it. Yeah,
which, coming from the story that Galadriel told us, which is the elves gifted this land to them for their loyalty during the war against Morgoth. You're like, whoa, what's changed?
Well, she knew, because even when they walked in and Halbrand's like, do I detect a note of envy? She's like,
jealousy?
No, sorrow.
Yeah.
Because she knew, like, she's like, I haven't been here in a long time.
Nobody's been here in a long time.
And she knows that. She's like, no, we're not welcome here anymore.
Yeah.
So she knows, and I think she's sad about it, but...
Yeah. So they get there, and everybody's kind of, like, standoffish about her. There's a great moment, though, where Elendil comes up, And the guard's like, the queen's busy. And he just kind of stands to the side like, elf.
Yeah. And the guard is like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Dead silent.
Yeah. Great scene. It was a great scene.
That was just a perfect way, because there's two sides to this elf issue on Numenor. Is that there are those who are faithful, right? They're kind of the loyalists to the elves, and then
the
there's
old
those
ways,
who kind of,
which comes from the king.
and then there's the others who are kind of like, we don't need anything to do with you anymore. You don't need to be here. We don't need your help. We don't need your oversight or any of that. And this guard is somewhere in between. He's like, okay, elf, great. We have a history with them, but, elf, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah,
so it's just...
I don't get paid enough for this.
Yeah, exactly. This is above my pay grade. That's it. That simple interaction with that guard
was really good.
Was just really good.
Episode 4 dives a little more into this, but we see it in episode 3, which is... Oh, another great line from episode 3, but goes into my point, which is Elendil says, "You have eyes," or
my daughter runs fast, and my son runs blind,
and your eyes reflect both.
Yeah, something like that.
And Elendil is by far so far my favorite character.
He's pretty great.
He's pretty great. I love those types of noble, charismatic
dad figures.
Yeah. he's by far my favorite so far. But that sums up Galadriel, and in episode 4 they kind of dive a little more into that, where
she just runs fast and blind, head first, doesn't think.
And like, and Hellbrand brings up in episode 4, he's like, the politics isn't your typical battlefield, is it? You're like, if you're running head first into orcs, you know what to do.
Oh yeah.
You run head first into politics, you're out of your depth.
Yeah. Like, wait, and we see just how far out of her depth she is.
Which we've had glimpses of, because Elrond, in the first 2 episodes, was like, hold on, like, bring it, like, don't throw away this gift. Like, don't do, like, and he's the political one, right? He knows how to maneuver and do that. And them being friends makes for a perfect combination, right?
Yeah.
She understands war, he understands politics.
Yeah.
But we see that more in episode 4, where when it comes to politics, she is just not... She's not wise.
No, not necessarily. So...
But yeah, but I really enjoyed that line from Elendil, you know, about the eyes. And then they go off to the west, to the library. Sweet library.
Awesome library.
And it was made by somebody important. I don't remember.
Elrond's brother.
Elros, yeah. And the tapestry that they have
of Elrond and Elros standing there, and then you got like the star in the heavens, which was probably supposed to be their father.
Yeah, so it was really good.
Get down, doggo. Get.
And then what else? Yeah.
So,
and so she finally figures out what the meaning is, which I was grateful for, because we've been talking for a while where we're like, yes, that has to be the answer. Like, if that's not the answer, they're gonna have to come up with something good.
So credit to Nerd of the Rings, who had this theory first, was that symbol was actually the map of Mordor, but as it was before it became Mordor, which is we have our gremlins at the door.
Yeah.
Which is the Southlands before it is turned into Mordor. So these people, though, she's been trying to find out what this is and where it's been and all of this for how many centuries now, and these people, this is the magic of librarians. Oh, this symbol? Yeah, we know what it is. And they, 10 seconds later, they pull out this scrap of, fabric, and they're like, here you go. I love it. Yeah. I love librarians.
Great libraries are often a great place for a story.
So she figures it out. She sees the scrap of material that has the same symbol on it, and then realizes that looking at it sideways.
Well, because there was some black speech written on it about the plan, which is about Morgoth's successor, Sauron, which is a little bit of a criticism because she mentioned Sauron before, but then all of a sudden,
It doesn't say Sauron though. It just says his successor.
yes, but
And I think
she realized it is
It
Sauron.
must be Sauron.
But that kind of makes me feel like, okay, but you kind of already knew this. So the whole combination was a little weird. Was like, aha, Mordor and his successor. Oh, Sauron? You mean the person I've been chasing?
Yeah.
Like
She was a little too stunned at finding out the revelation. But I wonder if
I think she should have been stunned by it's Mordor, not by the whole successor thing.
Yeah.
But she seemed to be stunned by the entire plan.
Yeah. Well, I mean that implies that this thought has been there for, this has been a plan for centuries now, and she's like, "Oh, I am steps behind, if not miles behind where these guys are." Because also, remember in the first episode, she was going north. She was going completely the wrong direction
Yeah.
from everything. And so she's probably like, I've wasted how much time? Because now she's here in Numenor, and she's like, I found a guy who says the orcs are in the Southlands. I found a map that says this plan is happening in the Southlands. She's like, it's probably a little bit of everything I thought I knew is wrong. And I am so far behind.
Well, sort of. She's like, I knew the evil was still out there, so she still clings to, I've been right about that. I'm the only one who knows.
Yeah. But that's the only thing she had right.
That's the only thing she had right. Yeah, she was in... But I like that, showing how devious Sauron is, right?
For sure.
We also get stuff with the Sylvan Elf.
Arondir.
And, so he gets
so
captured.
He's been captured.
And we hear of Adar. And...
Which in Quenya, the Elvish tongue, is father.
His father, which we learned in the next episode.
Yeah.
But in this episode, the captain is like, they keep talking in reverence tones about somebody's successor, Adar, and they also refers like, is that Sauron?
Yeah, Sauron has been known by many names.
And they're like, we don't know because he has a lot of names, right? That's basically what it was.
Yeah.
And they try to escape. Basically, everybody dies except for Arondir.
It's pretty good escape attempt too. Like, there's some sweet elvish stuff going on, running on the chains, and they're doing their hacking thing that was fun when they're all hacking at the same spot on the chain in a row.
So I appreciated that scene because it made a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
Like, they didn't escape and like oh, that was easy, or that should have been harder than it was, or something like. But it made a lot of sense. It's like, nope, you died, and the orcs pulled a devious trick with the water, which felt very like everybody knew it, including the elves, when they're just like, here, have some water, and he's like, I don't know, and he's like, it's not poisoned.
Yeah, you're tricking us somehow. And sure, the water wasn't poisoned, but the second the third one went to take a drink, slit his throat.
Yeah. So I enjoyed it. Felt very true to the characters. Mm-hmm. And then you get to the end, and you kind of get like a blurry picture of Adar, right? And we kind of get this sense he's elven.
Yeah.
So
he doesn't, like, even in the blurred moment, you can tell he's not as, like, grotesque as, like, the orcs are. And he's not human, because he looks angular.
You kind of see the ears, though.
Yeah.
But then it leaves you to wonder, is this going to be Sauron? Is it not? I think that was the purpose, even though it wasn't really hit home. I think it was supposed to, but it didn't.
Yeah, because Sauron is elven, right?
No. Well, Sauron is a Maiar, so
but does he have pointy ears?
He has different forms in which he can appear, so he can have pointy ears.
Okay.
But that's where the episode ends, and overall I thought it was pretty good, right? Mm-hmm. We finally have a mystery of a bad guy. Mm-hmm. We got Numenor kind of having these political machinations. Mm-hmm. We got to see Numenor, so I'm like, great, awesome.
Looks awesome.
And it looks awesome. Everything about it was great.
You got some more of, like, Halbrand's issues though too.
He gets thrown into jail.
But he rage mode. He went rage mode on these guys. Yeah. Like, he's kind of like, you know, you got your sociopath serial killer person, right, who looks totally normal throughout the rest of the day, and he's perfectly fine and you know, rather charming.
Until they pushed him a little too far, and he rage mode.
He, like, snapped someone's arm, like, right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And, like, bashed someone's head, and, like, it was brutal. And, like, Nerd of the Rings pointed out, he's like, this is probably the most human-on-human violence we've seen.
In any Lord of the Rings.
In anything Lord of the Rings. And, like, that was kind of terrifying.
But when he's in jail, Galadriel comes to him, and she realizes from the library, again, the library holding all answers that we ever want.
Yeah, so he's got a pouch with a symbol on it.
Yeah, saying that you're the king of the Southlands.
They have no king because that king is you.
Yeah. And so I postulated last week, I said, I think Halbrand is going to be a red herring. Mm-hmm. I think we're setting him up to be Sauron.
There's a good indication for it, and we'll talk about from...
And there's a good indication that he might be. I still think it's going to be a red herring. I think he's going to be the king of the dead men of Dunharrow. So there's in the Lord of the Rings, the movies, there's the ghosts who Aragorn goes to get them to fulfill their oath. Mm-hmm. Those are the dead men of Dunharrow. Who they had a king, and they were the men of the White Mountains, and they broke their oath to come to war during this Second Age. So it's somebody who was supposed to exist during the Second Age, and they didn't come. They didn't come and help out, and so they were cursed
to never pass on peacefully.
I think by oh man, who's Galadriel's elf buddy? Elrond. I'm so many E names. Aragorn's an E, but like they all sound like an E. But like he was, I think, was cursed by him. Now whether it was magic or not, I don't know. But they became ghosts. Mm-hmm. I think he's going to be that king. He's going to go back to the Southlands. He's going to build up an army and help fight back Sauron. And when the pivotal moment comes for them to go to war, he'd be like, no, I'm good. I'm king again. Life is good in my place. I'm not going to come. And he feels like that kind of character.
Yeah, maybe.
So that's what I postulated last week in episode 3. This week in episode 4,
we're getting more back into the storyline of Elrond and Durin.
And, yeah.
So we got a lot of that. We got further Numenor stuff. And then we got more into Adar and Arondir's story.
Yeah. And so we have Durin and Elrond, who they go into the mines, and they Elrond discovers that Durin is hiding the mystery of the Mithril, which all of that was great.
Yeah.
That whole thing was awesome. In fact, the ending scene is one of my favorite scenes so far, where Elrond is like, don't be mad at your father, or be mad at your father. Doesn't really matter. At least you get to have another word with him, because I didn't. My father became the star in the heavens, and I don't get judgment, I don't get sadness, I don't get happy, I get nothing, because...
My father is literally a celestial being at this point.
He's beyond my reach.
He's like, I wouldn't even care if it was... Anger or, you know, saying he was disappointed in me. At least I would have one more conversation with him.
And then Durin the Fourth, going to talk to Durin the Third, his father, he's like, okay, good speech, Elrond. I'm gonna go talk to my dad.
Yeah, but you're skipping everything that led up to that conversation.
No, I think it's good.
No, we gotta talk about, like, the whole Mithril and, like...
No, because I'm just talking about the scene in general, because this is my favorite scene.
Okay.
Because then he goes and talks to his dad, and he says, I'm sorry I was angry about the whole thing. And then Durin the Third, which I was not expecting this at all. I thought he was going to flip it on him and be like, yeah, you were stupid. You should have listened to me. He said, you know what? When I die... we believe that the voices of the kings of the past are with the new king. That they kind of speak through you. He's like, you don't have to wait that long. And this is where I thought he was going to be like, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
But he's like, he basically says, "I love you." What did he say? He
It
said,
says you will be, my voice will always be with you. But you don't need to wait that long, for I am always with you. There's nothing to forgive.
Yeah, there's nothing to forgive. Like basically saying he's proud of him, and he's like, even in your anger, probably most of all in your anger, I am with you. And so like it was this really touching, really good. It ended so strong. And I wanted to start there on the positive because that ending scene was so good. And I do like the Elrond and the Durin stuff. But that leads me to, this is my least favorite episode.
Oh, yeah.
I love that scene, and I like the build up to that scene. I don't like this episode. I'm bored. As interesting as everything is, we're halfway through the season and nothing has happened. We have more of Galadriel just running blind.
Being a punk.
And being a punk. Like, no lessons are being learned. We are now into 2 movies worth, right? So we're through the 2 Towers, the original theatrical releases, or at least through the Fellowship of the Ring, the first movie, time-wise, extended edition, and nothing has happened. Like, I can sum it up in like a few sentences, which is, we meet the species. Galadriel's looking for Sauron. She decides that she's going to go back to, heaven, whatever that place is called. Valinor. And then she ends up on Numenor. Nothing's happened on Numenor. And that's it. I mean, that's all that's happened in 4 episodes. Nothing. There are nuances I like. Like, I like that we get the introduction of the Palantir. I like that we get, and I like that they're doing it a little bit differently. If I remember right, they should have like 3 out of the 7 stones or something. I think 4 of them were lost because they end up taking them and the big one, which is the one that they have, to Middle Earth, and then they set up kind of the seeing stones in the important cities, like
Gondor.
I don't remember what the cities were, but they set them up in the important cities basically so they can, keep an eye on one another. Like, how are you doing? Like, they became like a telephone line basically, sort of, except for they weren't used like that because you don't use magic that way in Tolkien universes. But I like that basically she's like, they're all lost except for this one, which is fine. I like the vision of the downfall of Numenor, but
That was intense.
For an hour episode, basically nothing happens. Galadriel's still who she is. I like that Numenor is all about, they're a prideful species. They're all about the things that we've built and this and that and the other. That's really interesting, but I was hoping for some sort of political intrigue. Like, this show needs to pick up the pace.
I was actually surprised that Farazan was okay with Muriel's plan. That he's like, all right, your queen has spoken. Who's gonna go help her? Like, I expected him to be like, your queen has spoken and she is wrong.
I think this is what he wants, though. So it would have been nice to see some more inner workings, right? Mm-hmm. I think Farazan wants her to, because she says, I'm going to go. Who will go with me? And so I think once she's gone, he's like, I'm taking control over Numenor.
Maybe.
And so I think that's what's going to happen. And then here's where we get kind of the one really big scene that might be evidence that Halbrand is Sauron. We know that Sauron gets the ear of the king and the king's regent, whatever, and Farazan, and kind of whispers in their ear, trusted be, blah, blah, blah. And that leads to the downfall of Numenor, including Sauron's body. And then his spirit is like reborn on Middle-earth. Halbrand, while he's in jail, kind of helps Galadriel, like, what does the queen fear? Which is the other thing, like, he's so focused on people's fears and stuff. Like, that's a very evil trope to do. And so he helps Galadriel figure out what the queen fears, and she breaks out.
Yeah, because he points out, he's like, you've tried to attack her like you would an orc, and she's not batting an eye. Her heart did not race. He's like, but she threw you in jail for a reason. What did you do that made her do that? And then Galadriel's like, oh, the king.
Yeah.
Because Galadriel was like, all right, well, if you're not going to help me, Miriel, queen, then I'm going to go to the rightful ruler of Numenor, which is the king. And Miriel's like, no. And then threw her in jail.
Yeah. So I thought that was all fine and good. But then once she kind of breaks out and gets away, Helbrand whispers to Farazan, you're not going to want to do that. He's like, well, I can't just let her get away.
Yeah,
He's
because
like,
Farazan was trying to...
You can if you know where she's going. So he was about ready to turn on her. Mm-hmm. Which is a very Sauron thing to do, but could also be the king of the dead men of Dunharrow.
I think he just knows how to work a situation.
He does, but it feels very Sauron, whisper in your ear sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And we do see him free at the end, so he obviously negotiated for his freedom. But I think that points to Halbrand being Sauron. But I think that is a red herring. I don't think Halbrand is going to be Sauron. Simply because if he's Sauron, there's a lot of little plot holes. Mm-hmm. If he's Sauron, what the heck was he doing at sea?
Well, and why would he have told her? Yeah, he's in the south.
Yeah, if he's Sauron, why would he pose as a king?
Mm-hmm.
If all of that doesn't work to me, I think this is all a red herring. I think he's the king of the dead men of Dunharrow. I think it fits perfectly. I think he's going to go on this adventure. He might even be the one that Galadriel says the line in the trailer or whatever. He's like, we've been through so much together or something.
She already said all of that.
Did she?
Yeah, that fate, destiny, whatever it men ascribe to things that they can't handle.
That's right, she did say that.
She already said all that, yeah.
Anyway, that's where I think his story is going. I think they're pushing a little hard on that. My favorite stuff in this episode was Elrond and Durin. Again, was really good.
Just Disa. Disa's fantastic.
Disa's really good.
I love her.
The dwarves are great.
Her singing moment, too, there's the scene, they're mining Mithril, right? Mm-hmm. Elrond finds out, and Durin's like, all right, you gotta swear on the stones, and the stones will hold you to this. That you won't tell anybody about what I'm going to show you and tell you. Dwarven anger outlives even elvish memory. Yeah, that was a good line. Yep. And so Elrond swears, he's like, what you tell me shall not pass beyond my ears. Yeah. Which felt like a way of being like, oh, is he going to write about it then? Like, maybe he's going to write it down somewhere and then somebody's going to find out about it. But anyway, so he tells him about Mithril, and he's like, well, this is awesome. Why aren't you telling anybody about this? He's like, because it's perilous to mine. It is extremely dangerous to mine Mithril, which Khazad-dûm becoming the Mines of Moria, we know that this is probably the beginning of their downfall. But he's like... Well, it is. It's their greed and their... Yeah. So he says it's perilous to mine, and then sure enough, there's a cave-in. Durin himself would have been caught in it had Elrond not been there asking him questions, so he had him out of the shaft. But there were 4 dwarves trapped in the shaft. So Disa was singing a lament of some kind. It seemed like a funeral. It seemed like a funeral at first, but it was actually a plea to the mountains for its kindness that the dwarves will come out with breath. That was a pretty neat scene. Which we learn they do. The dwarves are fine. Those 4 who were trapped in the caves were fine. And so, Elrond's like, well, that's great news. Your father should be happy about it. And Durin's like, no. He's now decided that everything's done. We're not mining it anymore. He's like, I'm so angry. And then that's what leads to the conversation of, don't be mad at your dad, or do be mad at your dad, but at least you have your dad. Which was good. And... leads to more political... I don't think they're pushing enough the political intrigue. Mm-hmm. There's
a political battle going on in Numenor. They're just not pushing it enough. Pharazôn wants the throne. Muriel wants to remain queen or regent, but her father is secretly dying, and they don't want anybody to find out. That whole political thing with Galadriel thrown in there, should be a lot more interesting. But they really,
I wonder if so these days a lot of movies and shows and stuff rely on heavy action sequences to keep people entertained.
But they don't need action. They need dialogue to explain why this is so important.
I know.
What will happen if we right now we're just left up to our imagination runs wild, which is fine, but we don't know. If you didn't know Tolkien, I know Tolkien, or a fan knows Tolkien, you might not even know that Pharazôn wants the throne.
Yeah.
You might be like, well, he kind of seems like maybe not a nice guy. I don't know.
So I think it's difficult to write a good politically centered story. And the reason I say this is because people harped on the Star Wars prequels because they're too politically centered and stuff. And so I think there's a bit of a stigma against it.
Perhaps, especially amongst fantasy.
Yeah. But I agree with you. I want more of that story too. I want all of it.
Well, because even the dwarves and the elves have political intrigue going on. Mm-hmm. You can tell in that brief scene with Celebrimbor that he sent Elrond, because we basically jump right into it, which was a little annoying. They're already working on the tower, on the furnace.
The tower's pretty well built already.
Yeah, and Elrond's like, look, elves and dwarves working along. Would you ever imagine?
Yeah, who knew? It's so cool.
And Celebrimbor's like, yeah, but, don't you feel like they're kind of hiding something? Maybe you should go check that out. And so Elrond goes back to Durin. Mm-hmm. But then Durin the Third kind of says the same. Mm-hmm. Well, my son, don't you feel like the elves are kind of hiding something? So, there is a political battle going on there, which I wish they would emphasize a little more. Mm-hmm. And maybe even emphasize the stakes. What happens? What secret are you hiding? And what happens if the dwarves find out that secret? What secret are you hiding? Which we know is the Mithril. And what happens if the elves find out? We know that the dwarves are hiding Mithril. Mm-hmm. But what happens if the elves find out? It's not like the elves are going to come into the mine and mine it.
Yeah, they're not going to do it themselves.
So what are the stakes for the dwarves? We don't know because we're not told. And so it's lacking in that way. The political intrigue is really lacking.
So the only thing that we haven't talked about, and I figure it's because you hate the kids so much.
I do. But here's your action stuff, the stuff that's supposed to keep you interested, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like Numenor and the elves and the dwarves should be your political intrigue, but the center of the story, right? Galadriel, who's hunting Sauron, getting Numenor to come to the west and help out, but also the elves and the dwarves and the forging of the rings. That's the center of your story. The action stuff to keep general people interested should be the Arondir, Barwin, and the kid Bronwyn.
Theo.
Yeah, Theo.
So the interesting thing too is that Elrond and Durin and Celebrimbor and the furnace, that's actually kind of all a side story right now.
Which is irritating to me.
Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily fit into the main story yet because he's not even making the rings yet. That whole thing is a build-up story to the actual important moment where Sauron's going to be, whispering to Celebrimbor, make some stuff.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the kid and Arwen. So we get to see Adar.
Yes, yep. And Adar is
an elf.
Elven, yep. But he looks pretty beat up. He's scarred. His one ear's really messed up,
almost like cauliflower ear.
Cauliflower ear, exactly. Yeah. I was about to say that. And he's his hair's grungy and greasy and gross, which could just be from living amongst orcs. But
it seems like he was probably captured and tortured.
Yeah, and he's wearing dark clothing. He looks like a bad elf.
Which makes me think, I think he was turned by Sauron, although it seems like he's trying to seize power, right? So maybe not completely turned where he believes in Sauron, but turned enough because he even says, we've been lied to. So I think he believes what Sauron was preaching, right? Just doesn't necessarily believe in Sauron, who was his torturer.
I think he's saying that what the elves are teaching is the lie.
Yeah, I mean, same
Not Sauron.
difference.
But
Because Sauron believes the opposite of the elves.
So he even brings up, so he's like, so where are you from? And Arondir's like, I'm from such and such a place. He's like, yes, I remember that place. And you could see the shock in, a very elvish way on Arondir's face. He's like, what? Excuse me?
Because it's also where Arwen is from. It's not just Arondir is from. It's not just any old place. He's a Sylvan elf, which is now in the middle of the ocean. Like, it got drowned when they broke the 2 lamps, which we get a sense of in, like, the first episode. So, Arondir can never go home.
Yeah. So
to meet another elf who even has a sense of his home, let alone, like, we don't know if he's a Sylvan elf or not, probably not, but like, my home? Wasn't it great? Like,
yeah.
So he has that immediate connection, right?
Wanted or not,
which I don't think it was, because he was like holding the little stone to kind of protect himself. But Adar, obviously, and I brought this up last time, I think there's going to be several pretenders to the throne. Mm-hmm. I think the guy from the sky is probably going to be a Balrog.
Meteor Man.
Yeah, Meteor Man. And then we have Adar. So now you have your 2 pretenders to the throne, mm-hmm. who are like, I am the successor of Morgoth. And then we're going to get Sauron coming in like a son of a gun and just being like, y'all don't know nothing. Let me show you how being a Dark Lord really works. Mm-hmm. But that way, the audience and the characters get wins, right? Yay, we conquered Adar. Yay, we conquered Meteor Man. Oh, Sauron.
Yeah. Sum it up in one sentence.
Yeah.
Oh, Sauron.
And so I think that's where the whole story is headed. But that kind of leads me to my complaint / criticism, which is it's too slow. We are halfway through. Nothing's really happened. I'd be fine with it if this was a 25-episode season.
So like I said, they have a 50-hour plan. They have their plan and they're sticking to it. And I can appreciate that. But we also haven't even had, like, season 2 greenlit. And I feel like some shows, they get through, like, the first few episodes and they're like, yep, season 2 and 3 are...
I'm pretty sure it was immediately greenlit all the seasons.
Oh, it was?
Just because they spent so much money, they're like, okay, fine. Like, all the seasons are... Which is why they were able to tell us 5 seasons.
Yeah.
Because normally you don't get that out up front, right? So I'm pretty sure all the seasons... But even then, there is so much to cover in these seasons... Or in this second age, why are we dragging our feet? Like,
well, remember they have Elrond, Durin, Galadriel. Probably Halbrand's going to be a separate story from Galadriel going on, and then they've got Theo and Arondir and Bronwyn. So I mean, they've got like 4 or 5 different storylines going at a time.
Even so, having all those storylines. Why are we dragging our feet? Like,
yeah, but I mean, if you split it evenly amongst all 5, that's only 10 minutes each episode.
Which is, again, is fine. But then each scene, something needs to happen. Like, it needs to progress the story forward. But when you have scenes, this is the worst example, but like Galadriel riding the horse, that does not progress the story forward. When you have scenes like Halbrand in jail and Galadriel coming in to visit him and be like, I know that you're the king. That doesn't progress the story forward. That whole conversation could have happened when Galadriel got thrown into jail. When you have scenes where she goes and she visits the king, Farazan, or not Farazan, something Palantir, Tar Palantir. Basically, she just shows up to say, whoops, my bad, didn't know. That scene does not progress the story forward.
Well, for her, it was... She shows up and she's like, oh, I can't actually ask the king for an army because the king's basically dead.
Yeah. But that's it. That was... They need to use their scenes more wisely. If you're going to do all these storylines that need to tie all together, each scene has to matter.
I think it did force Muriel, though, into showing her the Palantir, which then gave her the vision of the fall of Numenor.
I still think it could have been written differently. Where that whole thing could have happened in any number of the times where she's been in court talking to Muriel.
The petals did start to fall, too, when she left, though.
Yeah. But still, they need stuff to happen.
Going back to the one storyline that you just refuse to talk about because you just don't like the kid, at all.
He just falls out of my brain because it is the worst. It's the worst.
Releases Arondir, and this is important because Arondir later comes to save the day. So he releases Arondir as long as Arondir will pass a message to the men who have gathered in the tower.
Yeah.
Which is, the refugees of these various villages that have been attacked by the orcs in the Southlands. Theo and that punk kid have decided that they're going to go get some food because everybody's hungry in the tower, so they're going to go raid Windrig's.
To his defense, though, and this is the one thing I'll say to his defense, his mom basically told him to do it without telling him to do it. She's like, stop making my life hard. You can either make my life hard or you can help out. He's like, fine, I'm going to go help out.
Yeah.
In the way that you didn't want me to.
Yeah. So they go to get, I think his name's Windrig or something like that. Winderg. He's like the town barkeep. Yeah. Basically. He runs the inn. And he's already been kind of a shady guy, and we learn why. He just seems kind of, off-puttish and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so they go to raid the root cellar at Windrig's barn, which we've been to before because he wanted to show his punk friend the hilt of the sword that he had found in that root cellar. So they go get the stuff from the root cellar and they're leaving, and Theo's like, I'm gonna go into the bar and see if there's any more food in there. And his friend did what I hoped he would do. I was like, if I was his friend, I would just leave. I would take the stuff and leave.
And he did once the clouds came in, which I was like, thank goodness, because the rest of that scene was so unbelievable.
Yeah.
It was bad. You even said this kind of feels like a video game.
Yeah, so he goes in there and everybody's favorite orc tries to kill him. Yeah. But he takes the hilt and he stabs into his own arm so that it has blood. So then the sword reforms from the hilt as if from, from fire and smoke.
But again, to what purpose?
Yeah.
He stabs himself.
He doesn't even use the sword to fight. He just runs. Except the orc was like, oh, you have it. So we've known that the orcs have been hunting for something. We've all guessed it was going to be the sword hilt.
Yeah. Which we believe Adar's going to use to cement his claim to the throne,
sure.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. And so Theo manages to hide for a bit. Late at night, the orcs are still trying to find him because they're like, he has the sword, or he has the thing we've been looking for. And he does this really video gamey, sneaky escape.
But
he stumbles out and you get the orc popping their head up to look around and then going back down, and then he tumbles into the grass and the orcs
happen to walk by.
Or
I smell something. Nah, I'm not gonna go check it out.
Yeah, because so and so called me over.
But also, no one in their right mind, especially when you're afraid for your life, hey, the orcs are over there. I'm gonna go towards the orcs.
I'm gonna go through the town
rather than the opposite way.
I know. I don't know why he didn't go towards where it was dark. He chose specifically to go through the town where they were all hunting for him, and he even gets caught.
Well,
because he stops and he turns around and he kind of smiles behind him, and then he's like, I got away. And then everybody's favorite orc is there.
At one point though he falls into the well. which I thought was fine. That was played out fine. He hides underneath. Very typical horror-esque scene.
Yeah.
He comes out at night. The one thing that everybody in this universe knows about orcs is they don't like the sunlight. You know what? I'm going to come out at the dead of night. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, granted, he's probably like, I can't stay here much longer. They will find me if I stay here. And it was
Maybe.
overcast all day.
But he, like, that wasn't vocalized or nothing. So to me, it just, like, you're coming out at the worst possible time.
Yeah. And so then it just so happens that Arondir is there at the exact same time to save his butt. So then we get into them running through the tree. What?
But even then, so Arondir happens to show up at the town, happens to save him, which don't even know why he would go to the town because...
Well, the town might have been on the way to the tower.
Yeah, but before, when they found the pit in episode 2, he's like, go back to the town and, like, warn them, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So maybe it was on the way, whatever. But then as they're running away through the woods... He has like 8 arrows being chased by like a whole garrison of orcs.
Yeah, there's at least 20 or 30.
And this boy who walks or runs kind of funny.
He got cut on the back of his leg.
Yeah. Somehow they still get away.
Yeah, so...
I don't believe that entire scene whatsoever.
And then Bronwyn shows up. Happens to find them in the darkness of the woods.
Yeah, a
lot of the Theo storyline is unbelievable. Not just because it's fantasy, but because it's very tropey.
Yes.
And then they're like, and we really want to show Arondir catching an arrow and firing it back.
Which could have happened in any other scene.
Yep. So, long story short, after I just told you the whole long story, they get out of the woods, the sun comes out of the clouds, the orcs can't chase them, they get to the tower.
Tropey again.
Yep. And then they just stand there.
Which I hate.
And they wait. And maybe, okay, so I had the thought, I was like, maybe they're waiting to make sure that the orcs will not follow them. Because, I mean, if they keep running, they're going to get caught, they're going to die. But, so they stood there to wait, they're holding their ground to make sure the sun is actually stopping them. It did. Okay, we're good, we're leaving, we're at the tower.
Which was fine.
So we're at the tower, and kids being kids, they can't keep their stuff put away.
And there's constantly shuffling,
and
playing with the toy.
Looking at it, and and then Windrick comes out. He's like, "Here, have some alcohol, kid. You look like you need it." And he's like, "Also, I know you took my stuff."
Yeah, so we finally find out it was his basement, cellar, whatever.
Well, we knew it was.
I think I said we didn't even know whose house it was before.
So
maybe we did. Maybe we didn't.
And he's like, I know you took my sword. And the kid's like, I didn't. I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, yeah, you did. And he grabs his arm.
Well, after he shows his arm, right?
Which apparently, so apparently Windrig, or whatever his name is, has done the exact same thing and stabbed himself with the hilt.
Which makes me, I said, is this like a drug addict thing?
Yeah.
Does it make you feel good?
Or is it like an urge that anybody who picks it up, that is the first thing they're going to do is...
Yeah, are you... almost like The Ring, right? Are you drawn to putting it on? Are you drawn to stabbing it into yourself?
Yeah. So
no explanation.
And he's like, you ever heard of the name Sauron?
Yeah. You want to buy a sundial?
Basically.
Just...
And now he's like, you rest up, kid. Shh, it's gonna be okay. Because we need to start a cult. Basically, is what it felt like. He's like, we're gonna start this cult.
Which,
this is like a 10-year-old punk. Just honestly, in any other story,
he would have taken the sword, killed the kid. Yeah.
But instead, he's like, oh yeah, so you got my sword, you stole it, you can keep it, and we're gonna, do some bad stuff because Morgoth.
But also. I know, and just before that scene was Arondir telling Bronwyn
that
they're coming for the tower.
Yeah, leave all of or forsake all your lands and kneel to him and swear fealty and he'll let you live. And she's like, but what if we don't?
And he's like, well, then he's coming for the tower.
Yeah.
But so I took that scene as she's the first to find out, so no one else knows. Mm-hmm. Stupid. Because that's the first thing you tell everybody when you get there. But apparently he's just been walking around being like...
Yeah, she's kind of just decided that she's the leader. And I'm telling you, it's because she's wearing blue. Yeah. She's decided that she's the leader. And it's even brought up, one of the guys is like, who put you in charge? She's like, well, nobody else is doing it. He's like, we don't need someone in charge.
I actually appreciated that, though. And she's like, who put you in charge? She's like, everybody the second you decided to leave with me.
Yeah.
Like, so I appreciated that. But now we have Adar's coming for the tower, which he should have told everybody immediately. To the guys like, we're going to form a Sauron cult.
Yeah.
You got bigger problems than your cult that you've been sitting on for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
I just... Like, if he was going to be a cult leader, blah, 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 then he should have been forming that beforehand. Which maybe he has, maybe he hasn't, but there's been no indications of that.
There's also, like, a solid at least 100 people at this tower, because they've been taking in multiple refugees from different villages. And, you know, Theo's punk friend comes back with, like, a barrel or a wheelbarrow of stuff.
Food.
And they're like, yo, this'll last us for weeks. And I'm like, that'll last you guys, like, an afternoon. Because Windry comes out, he's like, puts, like, 5 potatoes on the barrel. And she's like, where's the rest? He's like, this is the rest. Oh, we got a ration. You can't ration 5 potatoes amongst 100 people.
But let's even just assume it's 30 people, right?
Sure.
Let's assume it's just that small town.
Well,
5 potatoes, and they're like, this will last us a day. 5 potatoes will last one person or 2 people a day.
Or an afternoon.
Sure, everybody gets a bite a day.
Yeah.
But you're also not going to starve in a day. Like, the whole...
And then she's like, send out the hunters, and the guy's like, yeah, okay. It's like, you were just complaining about her being in charge.
and then they come back with a pheasant. Like
a couple of them.
Yeah, but it's like, okay, like, that's another day's worth.
Yeah.
Like,
honestly, for these people, they have to take it day by day.
But what were you hoping for? A whole boar? Like, like, I would take that as a win. They brought it back like pheasant. And they're like, pheasant. Like... it's like the people who wrote at least this episode, because this is my least favorite episode, threw everything out the window except for the Tolkien stuff, because they mention a whole bunch of, like, Farazan gives a speech mentioning a whole bunch of lore. We get the Palantir, and we get visions of the fall of Numenor, and so it's like anything that wasn't related directly to Tolkien stuff. They're like, we forget how to write this. Just slap something together. It became very tropey. Very poorly written.
I'm just not there for any of the Theo, Arondir, Bronwyn stuff.
I am not. I think they're trying to make him into one of the Lich Kings of the future, whatever. I just don't care.
The Nazgul.
I don't care. I don't think it's being done well.
I don't care!
My favorite stuff and favorite scene so far was with Elrond and Durin. That was done really well. But again, that's very Tolkien-centric. The finding of Mithril, the leading into that age that Durin talks about, where this could lead us into a new age. It is, and you just don't know it yet. Mm-hmm. So that's very Tolkien. I'm down with that. All this other stuff, I'm like, my goodness. And you have to trudge through it. And the Elrond and Durin stuff maybe took 20 minutes. Maybe. So you got 40 minutes of, in my opinion, wasted material. We need to pick it up. Like, to me, these feel like a worse version of the extended versions of The Lord of the Rings. Because the extended versions, I like them, but I don't love them. I know some people love them because you get more, right?
Sure.
But by the end of the movie, you're like, whew, that was long. You enjoyed it, but it was long.
Yeah.
Here, we're not at the end yet, so I don't know what the end looks like. I'm sitting here, I'm like, this is long. I was like, I don't feel the satisfaction of an ending yet, because we're not there yet, but I'm like...
It's very mid-story right now. I think when it comes to telling a story in TV format, where you have a bit more time to actually explore stuff, your build-ups are going to naturally take longer. So we're on the uphill climb to a climax, and we're about so here's our climax, right? We're about here right now. And, it's probably next episode is when some things are going to tie together again.
Well, they have to because we're now on the downhill of this season. Because 5, 6, 7, 8, and then that's it.
Yeah, but usually 6, 7, and 8 is where you're going to have climax, after effect, setup for next season. So even next episode can be build up probably as well.
It could. I'm just, and I honestly I expect them to be, but this was such a contrast to me because I got my favorite episode contrasted with my least favorite episode, so I have very mixed feelings right now.
Yeah.
I don't know how to feel about the show. I like it in general, but overall I'm conflicted.
Well, so like episodes 1 and 2 work really well together. That is essentially, episodes 1 and 2 are essentially what I consider one episode. Those are two that need to be watched back to back. 3 is a really good episode by itself, and I actually feel like 4 and 5 are going to be 2 episodes that need to be watched together, because 4 became a bit more of a build-up thing again. We had the setup for Theo's story, we have the setup for Rondir coming back, we have the setup for the Numenorians actually getting into the fight, we have the setup for, what's next for Elrond and Durin. So this was another setup episode. And I think that's why you didn't like it. Was you feel like, we've already done a bunch of setup. Well, episode 4 is probably another setup.
Maybe. I mean, you could be right. I know the dog's scratching herself. Stab it. But time will tell. I'm a little mixed. I like it overall because I love Tolkien. I love fantasy.
What a day to be a fantasy nerd.
It is, yeah. We live in an embarrassment of riches. But time will tell if this show ends up being any good. So far, I'm a little bit mixed. I'll probably still love it regardless. Kind of like we have our guilty pleasures. But,
The 100.
for you, the 100, yeah. But that's all I've got to say on these episodes.
Yeah.
We'll probably do these in sets of 2. Right?
I'm still enjoying the show. Don't get me wrong.
Overall, I am still enjoying it.
I love the way it looks.
It's still the most beautiful thing I've seen in a long time.
I like almost every single actor.
Yep.
I love the diversity of the cast that we've been able to get. I have 0 issues of black elves or black dwarves or dwarves without beards or any of that. I think that's actually a lot of fun because I like having a bit of the world reflected in the things. Like,
to me, it makes it more believable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It lets me get into it. I mean, it'd be so boring. And honestly, Lord of the Rings being the movies the way they were, everybody was white.
Yeah.
And it's even said in, Tolkien's books, like the Harfoots
are of darker skin. Yeah.
Are of darker skin. That doesn't necessarily mean that he straight up thought they were black, but they have darker skin. Whatever. Who cares? This is a fantasy world.
Well, and a world, right? We want to see it reflect our own.
Yeah.
So that people can latch on to stuff that we associate with, right? Mm-hmm. Some people might associate with the dwarves, and maybe you had a similar courtship like Durin and Disa had.
I love that.
Or maybe you've got little rascally kids who are constantly running off.
Bashing your dad's heads into things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gerda and Gamli.
So I mean, overall I still like it. I think in the end I'll be like, it was good. I was just hoping for this is the best thing I've ever seen. So maybe my expectations were a little high. I'm gonna try and lower them a little bit.
It's hard having to do things episodic though too. We're very much used to doing the whole story at the pace that we want to take it at.
We like to binge.
Yes, we like to binge, and we like to binge the amount of episodes that we want to binge. It may not even be the whole season in one go.
No, but we'll be like, that's a good stopping point.
Yeah, exactly. So I am still thoroughly enjoying that this even exists. Because I think they're actually doing a very good job, considering they don't have all the rights to every single part of the story.
They have a lot, though.
They do, sure, but they're also these aren't actual full stories like the Lord of the Rings books that they're adapting. They're kind of just taking not necessarily half-finished stuff.
There's segments, and then we know
Yeah.
where it ends, so you have to fill
Yeah.
in all the middle.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think they're doing a pretty darn good job.
I think it's good. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's good. It's not great yet.
Yeah.
I'm hoping for great.
All right. Well, straight on an hour. Nice.
Yeah.
So that was our reviews in the dark for The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, episodes 3 and 4.
Bye.
Bye.